So hello and welcome everyone to this tutorial session. In this video, we are going to understand about some standard data types that are available in Python. So we start off this video by understanding what are data types in Python. Then we will discuss about some standard data types. For example, we understand what are numeric data types in Python. After numeric, we will discuss what are string data types. Then we will understand how we can create and use the list data type in Python. After list, we will discuss what are tuple and how we can create them in Python. After tuple, we will discuss how we can create and use sets in Python and what are set data types. And in the last, we will understand what are dictionaries and how we can create and use them in Python So without any further delay, let's jump on to our first topic and understand what are data types. So in Python, data types can be considered as the classification of data that instruct a computer system on how to interpret a value. Now, a data type is just an attribute that is associated with a data that helps to identify how much memory a machine requires. Now, although we have already understood that we do not need to explicitly indicate the data type when declaring a variable, still it is vital to understand that there are many sort of values that we can assign to a variable. After all, a value assigned determines the data type of a variable. Now Python consists of multiple data types. However, out of all, we are going to discuss six basic data types. So these were the six basic data types that we are going to discuss. So now let's discuss about each of these data types in more detail, and we start off by understanding numeric data type. So the numeric data type in Python is used to represent numbers. Now this numeric data type in Python can be categorized into three types based upon the value of the number. So first is the integers, second is the floating point numbers, and last is the complex numbers. So if I talk about integers are just numeric values without any fraction part. These numeric values include 0, positive, as well as negative numbers. Now let's understand how we can declare integers in Python. Now for this example execution, I am using Jupyter Notebook, but you can use any tool as per your preference. So first let's understand how we can declare integer type variables. Here in this example, you can see first we declare a variable named counter with value 0. Now here 0 is an integer value, so this counter variable will become integer type variable. Then we have defined product underscore quantity, and the value of this variable is 25. So 25 here is a positive integer. And in the last, we have defined x as minus 12. So as this number does not consist any fractional part, it will be an integer. So it will be considered as a negative integer. So after declaring variables, what doing, we are simply using the print function to print value of each variable. Plus we are using this type function to get the data type of this variable. So we just need to pass the value for which we want to determine the data type. First, we want to determine the type for counter variable, and we have done this thing for each variable. So we have done this for product quantity as well. We are printing the value and we are determining the data type of it, and we have done this for variable x as well. So we are printing the value of x, and then we are trying to print the data type of x. So if I execute this cell, you can see we got this result. So very first, this print statement is executed. Value of counter is 0 because we declare counter as 0. Then this statement is been executed. So data type of a counter variable is, then we are using the type function in it. So the data type of counter variable is int. So it belongs to the int class, which represents integer. And after this, we are simply using this empty print function. So when we use this empty print function, it will print an empty line here. And after this, we are again using the print function to do the same for remaining two variables. So we are doing it for product underscore quantity variable and x. So all these variables are of integer data type. Now next, let's discuss about the next numeric data type. So next numeric data type is the floating point number. So floating point numbers are commonly known as float data types. These data types represent positive as well as negative real numbers with some fractional part, and this fractional part is portrayed using a decimal sign. Now let's understand how we can define a floating point number in Python. So here you can see I have defined one example. So first we are finding some float type variables. So I have defined weight, and this value of weight is 75.8. Now this 75.8 is a positive floating point number, and then I have defined y, and the value of this y variable is minus 15.8, so it will be a negative floating point number. And after this, what we are doing, we are simply using the print function to print the value of weight variable, and also using the type function to get the data type of this variable. And we are doing same for the y variable, and in between we are using this print function to print an empty 9. So if I execute this cell, you can see we got our result. Value of weight is 75.8. Data type of weight variable is class float. So float here represents floating point numbers, and the value of y is minus 15.8, and the data type of this y variable is float. Now let's move to our next numeric data type, that is complex numbers. So complex number in Python consists of combination of a real number and an imaginary number. So for example, we got this number 9 plus 2j. So in this, 9 is the real number and 2 multiplied by j is an imaginary number. Now there is one more basic rule in Python, that we can only use j to represent the imaginary part. If we use any other character, for example I or k, then the Python interpreter will return an error. But let's first understand how we can declare complex numbers in Python. And again, here I got one example where I have declared two complex number x and y. Now, as I told you, we can only use j to represent the imaginary part. Now, j can be in lowercase or it can be in uppercase. So here I have declared two complex number. The first one consists j as a lowercase and the second one consists j as uppercase. Then what we are doing, we are simply printing out the value of each variable x and y, and we are determining the type using the type function. So if I execute this cell, here we can see we got our result. Value of x is 9 plus 2j, and the data type of x variable is complex, which represents complex numbers, and the value of y is 3 plus 5j, and the data type of y variable is complex. Now if we try to use any other character in the imaginary part instead of lowercase j or uppercase j, then the Python interpreter will throw an error. So here we can see another example where I have declared z as 7 plus 2k. Now here I'm trying to declare z as a complex number, but instead of j I have used k, and then we are simply using the print function to print the value of z variable and also the data type of it. So if I execute this cell, you can see here we got an error stating syntax error, invalid decimal literal. So we cannot use any other character instead of j. So if I put j here and then execute this cell, you can see we got our output and the code gets executed successfully. Now let's move to our next topic and understand about the string data types in Python. So in Python, string type values are just series of characters with a particular order that helps to store and express text-based data. So in Python, strings are nothing but just sequence of character that represents text-based data. Plus, strings are kept in a contiguous memory area as an individual characters. Now to define a string value in Python, we can either use single quotes or we can use double quote, and the value will be defined within the quotes. Moreover, we can access a string in Python and its character in both forward as well as backward way. Additionally, strings in Python are immutable, which means we cannot modify a string once it has been created. So here you can see an example where Jesse is a string type value. Now for this I have used single quotes, and then there is Gravel, which is also a string type value, but for this implementation I have used double quotes. So both are correct ways to define a string in Python. Now let's understand this thing by executing it. So I'm back to my Jupyter notebook. Here first I have defined first underscore name variable, and the value of this is Jesse, and for this I have used single quotes, and I have defined another variable last name as Gravel, and this time I have used double quotes to define it. Now both these variables are of string data type. After this, we are using the print function to print the value of each variable. And in the last, what we are doing, we are using the type function to fetch the data type for both the variables. Now let's execute this cell, and here you can see we got our result. First name is Jesse, last name is Gravel. Data type of first name variable is str. Now here str class represents string, and again the data type of last name is also str, which represents string data type. Now let's move forward and understand about list in Python. So a list is an extremely flexible and a widely used data type in Python. It is a collection of items having a specific order. However, it is not necessary for all the items in the list to be of same type. Now a list object comprises one or more elements in square brackets separated by a comma, and each element can be of same as well as of different data type. So here we can see an example of list. So here we can see an example of list. To define a list, we need to use the square brackets, and within the square brackets we can define multiple values either of same or of different data type. So for this example, I'm defining string type values. So I'm using single quotes for each string type value, and this list contains all the string values, but we can also put different type of values as well. So let us understand this implementation using an example in Python. So here we can see an example. Now first we are declaring an empty list variable. So I have defined one variable, my list. I have simply put this empty square brackets. So by this we are defining an empty list. Then we are using the print function to print this empty list. After this we have defined countries variable. This time what we are doing, we are defining all string type values in this list. So after this again we are using the print function to print the value of this variable. In the last we are creating a variable items, but for this we have defined a list with heterogeneous data. Now heterogeneous means that the list can consist data of different data type. So here in this list, first we have defined a string value laptop, then we have defined an integer value 32. After this we define a float value, that is 78.4, and in the last we have defined one boolean value, that is false. And in the last what we are doing, we are using the print function to print the value of this items variable. So if I execute this cell, you can see we got our result. First is an empty list, second is a list of countries consisting all string type values, and in the last we got list of items containing heterogeneous data. So I hope the point is clear now. Now let's move to the next topic and discuss about tuples in Python. So just like list in Python, tuples are also collection of one or more Python objects. In Python, we can create a tuple by defining elements within the parenthesis separated by a comma. Now each element can be of same as well as of different data types. Now there are some difference between list and tuple. So a list in Python is mutable, which means we can modify a list even after creating it. But tuples on the other hand are immutable, which means we cannot modify a tuple once it is created. Now let's understand how we can define tuples in Python using an example. So here you can see I got some sample code. In this, first we have defined this my tuple variable, and I have defined empty parenthesis, which means it will be an empty tuple. Then we are using the print function to print the value of this tuple. Then I have defined names. Now for this tuple, I'm using all string values. So I'm using single quotes to define string values, and I have defined 4 string values in this name tuple. After this, I'm using the print function to print the value of this tuple. Now in the last, I have defined items, and for this I am using heterogeneous data. So I have put string value, then integer value, then float value, and then in the last I have put boolean value within the same tuple, and in the last I am using the print function to print its value. So if I execute this cell, here you can see we got our result. First is an empty tuple, second is a tuple with all string type values, and in the last we got a tuple items with all heterogeneous data. So now next let's discuss about set data type in Python. So unlike list and tuple, a set in Python is an unordered collection of data with no duplicates. So list and tuples are ordered data types in Python. It means it will stay in the order that we define, but sets on the other hand are unordered data types. It means the order in which we define a set will not matter. It can return set values in any way. Plus sets does not contain any duplicate values. So we can also consider a set in Python similar to a mathematical set, and we can also perform various set operations like intersection and union using sets in Python. Now we can define a set by specifying elements in curly braces, and we can also modify the set elements even after it is created. So sets in Python are mutable. So let's understand how we can define set in Python. So here I got an example where first I have defined this random set variable. Now to define a set, I'm using curly braces and within this curly braces I have defined integer values. So I have defined a set having all integer values. Then I am using the print function to print its value. After this, I have defined this variable items, and to define the value of items, I am using set with heterogeneous data. And again in the last, I am using print function to print its value. So if I execute this, so we can see we got our our result. Now, as I told you, a set in Python will not return any duplicate values. If somehow we put any duplicate values in our set, then it will only return unique values. So here you can see an example. I have defined this data variable, which is of set data type, and for the set I have defined multiple integer values. Now one thing that we can notice here is the value 10 is coming two times in this set. Now if I try to print the value of this data, you can see it has returned value 10 only once. Plus we can see the order in which the set has been returned is little different from what we have defined. So we started with 10, then 54, 65, 76, and then again 10. But in the output, we got first 65, then 10, then 76, then 54. Now let's move to the next topic and understand about dictionaries in Python. Now, dictionaries in Python are also unordered data type which stores data in a key value pair. Now, this key value pair make dictionaries more optimized as key value pair are linked together where each key value pair associates a value with a key. Now, to define a dictionary in Python, we need to enclose a comma separated key value pair in curly brackets, and each key and its value should be separated using a colon. Now let's understand how we can define dictionaries using an example. So here I got this example code where first we are using the empty curly braces to define an empty dictionary. After this we are using the print function to print the value of this empty dictionary. After printing the value of empty dictionary, we have defined another dictionary variable named user underscore data. Now this dictionary is having all string keys. So if I look into the keys of this dictionary, which is first name, now this first name is defined between the single quotes. So it is a string type key, and the value of this first name is defined as James. So another key is last name, and the value of this last name is Brown. Then there is age, whose value is 34. Then there is weight, whose value is 73.6. And in the last we got is active key, whose value is true. Then we are simply using the print function to print the value of this user data dictionary. Now we can also define keys in dictionary of different type. So here we can see an example. So we define sample underscore data as a variable of dictionary type. Then we started the dictionary using the curly brackets. Within the curly brackets, first we define names. Now the names is a string type key, and the value for this key is a list consisting string type values, and we have defined another key 1. Now here 1 is a integer type key, and the value of this key is string, which is Cody. After this we define another key as 2.3. Now here 2.3 is a float type key, and again the value of this key is of string type, which is ADAR. Now in the last we are simply using the print function to print the value of this sample underscore data dictionary. Now if I execute this cell, you can see we got our result where first we got an empty dictionary, then we got user underscore data, which consists keys of string type. Then we got sample underscore data, which consists mixed keys. So we got names, which is of string, 1 is an integer, 2.3 is a float. So I hope all the examples are clear now. And with this, we have come to the end of this tutorial session. In this video, we have discussed about 6 standard data types in Python. So thank you for watching. We will see you in the next one.